Mar Azul was the kind of city that forgave its heroes. Built between ocean air and concrete streets, it lived and breathed pride. It celebrated loud victories and whispered its shame. If you brought glory to Mar Azul, real glory, the city would protect you, even from yourself. For nearly a decade, one young man stood at the center of that protection. His name was Adrian El Diamante Cruz. To the outside world, he was a boxer. To Mar Azul, he was something closer to a miracle. Adrian Cruz did not grow up rich. He grew up sharp. Sharp elbows in crowded rooms. Sharp instincts in louder neighborhoods. Sharp hunger for something bigger than the life he saw around him. As a child, he wasn't cruel, but he was territorial, competitive, easily ignited. One afternoon, when Adrian was 9 years old, a childhood argument turned physical. Parents rushed in. Apologies followed. But his father, instead of scolding him, said something that would echo for the rest of Adrian's life. If you're gonna fight, do it where rules protect you. That same week, Adrian stepped into a boxing gym for the first time, and something inside him clicked. Boxing gave Adrian something no one else ever had. Structure. Inside the ring, chaos became predictable. Pain had purpose. Fear could be measured. And more importantly, winning made people listen. By his teenage years, Adrian wasn't just good. He was surgical. Coaches noticed the discipline. Promoters noticed the speed. The city noticed the knockouts. By 19, he represented his country on the world stage. He didn't win gold, but he didn't need to. He looked like destiny. When Adrian turned professional, the wins stacked quickly. Crowds cheered. Cameras followed. Social media transformed him into a symbol. The humble boy, the respectful fighter, the future champion. He smiled easily in interviews. Thanked his city, thanked his family, thanked God. No one asked hard questions. No one wanted to. Long before Adrian became El Diamante, there was Lucia Morales. Lucia didn't meet him under bright lights. She met him in hallways, classrooms, and quiet afternoons that smelled like dust and summer heat. They were the same age. They grew up blocks apart. They knew each other when dreams were still fragile. Lucia was gentle where Adrian was intense. Thoughtful where he was impulsive. She loved animals, order, and routine. She dreamed of working in animal care, maybe opening her own clinic someday. Their relationship never announced itself. It simply existed. Even when they drifted apart, they never fully separated. When Valeria Santos entered Adrian's life, everything tilted. Valeria was younger, beautiful, visible, the kind of woman who looked perfect next to a rising star. She didn't live in Adrian's past. She lived in his future. Publicly, Adrian became a devoted partner, later a husband, eventually a father. The image was flawless. Behind it, the truth was not. Lucia knew Adrian wasn't faithful, but she believed something dangerous, that she was different. She wasn't a fling. She wasn't temporary. She was the woman who knew him before the masks. And Adrian never corrected her. Instead, he managed the situation. He decided when they met. He decided when they spoke. He decided when she could leave and when she couldn't. When Lucia tried to walk away, Adrian reminded her of what she would lose. Not love, access. Adrian was not violent in obvious ways. He didn't scream in public. He didn't strike her in front of others. His control was quieter. Threats framed as concern. Warnings disguised as protection. Isolation dressed up as loyalty. Lucia's world slowly narrowed until Adrian was at its center. By 2021, Adrian's career had slowed. Losses, injuries, doubt. For the first time, the future felt uncertain. And then Lucia called. She was pregnant. Lucia wasn't afraid when she discovered the pregnancy. She was 27, stable, employed, ready. She didn't ask Adrian what to do. She told him. His reaction was immediate and cold. The baby wasn't a child to him. It was exposure, a headline waiting to happen, a problem that refused to disappear. He demanded an abortion. Lucia refused. That refusal broke something in Adrian. He yelled. He threatened. He begged. He promised. Nothing worked. For the first time, Lucia had chosen something that wasn't him. and Adrian Cruz could not allow that. Adrian reached out to Mateo Rios, an old acquaintance who lived closer to the edges of legality. Mateo wasn't famous. He wasn't admired, but he was useful. The conversation wasn't emotional. It was practical. April 29th. Lucia arrived with medical documents, proof she believed would force Adrian to accept reality. She entered his vehicle willingly. That was the last choice she ever made. That night, Mar Azul slept. Adrian went home to his family. Lucia disappeared. And for a few hours, just a few, the illusion survived. Lucia Morales sat in the passenger seat with a folded envelope resting on her lap. Inside were hospital documents, black ink on white paper, stamped and signed. Proof. She believed paper had power, that once the truth was undeniable, Adrian Cruz would have to accept it. The truck smelled faintly of leather and metal. The dashboard lights cast a cold glow across Adrian's face. He didn't look at her when she spoke. Lucia tried to keep her voice steady. "I'm not asking you to leave your family," she said. "I just need you to accept this." Adrian nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the road. What Lucia didn't know was that the meeting had already ended before it even began. They parked in a dimly lit area near an industrial strip. It wasn't deserted, but it wasn't crowded either. Adrian had chosen it carefully, just visible enough to feel safe, just isolated enough to avoid witnesses. He finally took the papers from her. He didn't read them. He already knew what they said. The conversation shifted fast. Adrian's voice hardened. His jaw tightened. The charm evaporated. "You're ruining everything," he said quietly. Lucia shook her head, tears forming. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm creating something." That word, creating, landed like an insult. Adrian didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He struck. One sharp movement. A closed fist. The impact sudden and final. Lucia collapsed against the door, consciousness slipping away before fear could fully register. For a brief second, Adrian stared at her, breathing hard, hands shaking. Then he moved, not in panic, in preparation. Hidden in the rear of the truck was Mateo Rios. He had been silent the entire time. When Adrian opened the door and nodded, Mateo climbed out without a word. This wasn't his first crime, but it was the first time he realized there would be no turning back. Together, they worked quickly, too quickly. From the glove compartment, Adrian retrieved a syringe filled with a cloudy substance. Mateo had acquired it earlier that day, no questions asked. Lucia stirred weakly. Adrian injected her before she could speak. The drug slowed her body, but did not stop her heart. That mattered later. In the truck bed were items no one carries accidentally. Wire, a tarp, a concrete block. They bound Lucia's wrists and ankles, secured the weight, covered her body. She was still alive. Mateo noticed. Adrian ignored it. Mateo took the wheel of Lucia's car. Adrian drove his truck. They traveled separately, but close. Two shadows moving through Mar Azul's sleeping streets. Traffic cameras captured them. At the time, no one noticed. The bridge over Laguna Negra was quiet at night. The water below reflected distant lights, giving the illusion of peace. Adrian stopped first. Mateo pulled in behind him. They checked the surroundings. Empty. Adrian pulled back the tarp. Lucia's eyes were open. She tried to speak. They lifted her together. The concrete dragged her downward as soon as she hit the water, but she didn't disappear right away. She struggled. That's when Adrian took the gun. 3 shots. The sound echoed across the lagoon, sharp and final. Then silence. Adrian washed his hands, changed his clothes, went home to his wife and child. He slept. Mateo didn't. Lucia didn't show up for work. That was the first red flag. She was punctual, reliable, predictable. When calls went unanswered, concern turned to fear. Her sister went to the apartment. The animals were still there. Hungry, anxious, waiting. When questioned, Adrian was calm. He said he hadn't seen Lucia. Said he'd been home all night. Said people were inventing stories. He sounded convincing. He always did. 2 days later, a passerby noticed something unusual near the lagoon. A shape. Police recovered the body shortly after. The city learned the truth together. Mar Azul erupted. Candles lined sidewalks. Protesters filled streets. Signs demanded justice. The Golden Boy's name was no longer whispered with pride. It was shouted with anger. Investigators moved quickly. Traffic cameras showed both vehicles. Phone records placed Adrian at the bridge. Hair fibers were recovered from his truck. The gun was registered to him. And then Mateo cracked. Mateo told them everything. About the call, about the plan, about the concrete block. He didn't minimize his role, but he didn't protect Adrian either. The illusion collapsed. Adrian Cruz was taken into custody. He said nothing, not because he had nothing to say, because silence was the last form of control he had left. The arrest didn't happen in secret. When police placed handcuffs on Adrian Cruz, word spread through Mar Azul faster than the morning sun. Cameras appeared. Phones were raised. Neighbors stood frozen in doorways. Some cried. Some cursed. Some refused to believe it. Because this wasn't just an arrest, it was a rupture. For years, Adrian had been the city's proof that greatness could rise from ordinary streets. Now those same streets watched him led away, silent and expressionless. The diamond had fractured. Valeria Santos learned the truth the way most families do, through fragments. A phone call, a reporter's question, a sudden realization that the man she married had a second life she never truly knew. She cooperated with investigators, not out of revenge, but out of shock. When asked about Adrian's whereabouts the night Lucia disappeared, Valeria hesitated, then told the truth. He hadn't been home. That single sentence erased his alibi. Prosecutors didn't rush. They didn't need to. The evidence aligned too cleanly. Surveillance footage showing two vehicles moving together. Cell tower data mapping Adrian's exact route. Hair fibers recovered from the truck. Ballistics linking the weapon to the crime. And finally, the confession of Mateo Rios. Each piece alone was troubling. Together, they were devastating. Adrian Cruz refused to cooperate. No statements, no interviews, no plea. His attorneys argued contamination. Circumstantial evidence. A rush to judgment fueled by public pressure. But silence, once his shield, now worked against him. Because while Adrian said nothing, Mateo said everything. Mateo Rios did not pretend to be innocent. He described the call, the money, the plan. He admitted to obtaining the drugs, the wire, the concrete. He told investigators who made the decisions and who pulled the trigger. His testimony was slow, methodical, unemotional, that made it believable. When the trial began, it was held partially virtually due to ongoing public health restrictions. Even so, the audience was massive. Screens filled with faces. Journalists took notes. Families watched from separate rooms. Lucia Morales was no longer just a name. She was a symbol. Prosecutors walked the jury minute by minute through April 29th. The phone call, the meeting, the drive, the bridge. Experts explained how the drug slowed Lucia's body without stopping her heart, how the weight dragged her down, how the gunshots were not necessary, but intentional. The cruelty wasn't incidental. It was deliberate. A medical examiner testified that Lucia had been alive when she entered the water. That sentence changed the air. Some jurors looked away. Others closed their eyes. No one moved. Near the end of the trial, Adrian Cruz requested to address the court. It was the first time he spoke publicly since his arrest. He denied everything. He said he was being framed. Said Mateo was lying to save himself. Said he loved Lucia and would never harm her. There were no tears, no apology, only defiance. After days of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom exhaled as one. For some, it was relief. For others, devastation. For Mar Azul, it was the end of a lie it had protected for too long. Because of the severity of the crimes, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the death of an unborn child, the court prepared for the harshest penalties allowed. Prosecutors sought the maximum. Lucia's family asked for life imprisonment. They didn't want death. They wanted remembrance. Mar Azul changed. Murals appeared. Lucia's name painted in soft colors. Vigils became annual. Conversations grew louder. People began to talk openly about control, abuse, and the danger of idolizing men without questioning their behavior. The city learned, too late, that talent does not equal character. Adrian Cruz now lives behind concrete and steel. No crowds, no applause, no control, just time, endless time. The day after the verdict, Mar Azul woke up without closure. There were no parades, no sense of triumph, just a heavy quiet that settled over the city like fog. Justice had been delivered, but justice, the city learned, does not restore what violence takes. Lucia Morales was still gone. So was her child. And the man who had once been the city's pride was now its shame. Lucia's family tried to rebuild a life that no longer made sense. Her sister moved apartments. The old place smelled too much like memory. Their mother stopped answering unknown phone numbers. Too many strangers wanted interviews, opinions, sound bites. They did not want to be symbols. They wanted Lucia back. Her animals were adopted by friends. One of the dogs would still wait by the door at night, ears lifting at every sound. Grief, they learned, does not follow schedule. Valeria Santos filed for divorce quietly. There were no statements, no interviews, no public accusations. She focused on raising her daughter, building a life defined by routine and safety. But the shadow followed her. Online messages, whispered accusations, strangers who assumed guilt by proximity. She learned a painful truth. Being adjacent to violence still leaves scars. Mateo Rios received a reduced sentence for cooperating, but freedom did not come with forgiveness. In prison, he was known as the man who talked. Outside, he would be known as the man who helped. Some nights, he replayed the moment at the bridge. Not the shots, but Lucia's eyes when the tarp was pulled back. Those eyes followed him into sleep. Mar Azul could not return to innocence. Schools added workshops about control and emotional abuse. Community centers hosted discussions once considered uncomfortable. Murals replaced billboards. Lucia's name became part of the city's vocabulary, not as gossip, but as warning. People stopped saying, "He didn't seem capable of that." They started asking, "What did we miss?" The old boxing gym still stood. Posters of Adrian Cruz were taken down quietly. No ceremony, no statement, just bare walls where heroes once hung. Young fighters trained there now, sweating, dreaming, chasing futures. But coaches spoke differently. They talked about character as much as speed, about accountability as much as power. Because Mar Azul had learned the cost of worshiping talent without scrutiny. Adrian Cruz's world shrank to concrete dimensions. Morning counts, metal doors, silence punctuated by noise. He never gave interviews, never admitted guilt, never apologized. Some inmates recognized him. Others didn't care. Fame evaporates quickly in places where everyone has fallen. There were debates. Should Adrian's achievements be erased? Should his fights be archived or forgotten? Should the city pretend he never existed? In the end, Mar Azul chose neither celebration nor denial. They chose context. Years later, when the story is told, it begins differently. Not with victories, not with medals, not with fame. It begins with Lucia, with a woman who loved animals, with a woman who believed truth mattered, with a woman who refused to disappear quietly. This was never just a crime story. It was a story about control disguised as love, about silence mistaken for strength, about how communities protect their heroes until the cost becomes unbearable, and about how one refusal, the simple act of saying no, can expose everything. On the bridge over Laguna Negra, traffic still passes. Most people don't stop. Some slow down. A few leave flowers. The water moves on. But Mar Azul remembers.